All right, in this video, we're going to look at identifying the domain and range of graphs. There's two different types of graphs that we can find the domain and range of. And in these graphs, we call these ones finite graphs. These ones are called finite graphs. And we call them finite graphs because they have stopping points. Okay, think of like finishing. All right, looking at these graphs, notice here at the endpoints of these graphs, we don't have arrows that continue the graph on. We have dots that cause the graph to stop. That's what makes these finite graphs. And it changes the way that we do the domain and range just slightly. Okay, so recall from your notes, the domain is all of the possible x values, and the range is all of the y values. Okay, and since we're going to look at the domain first for these three problems, the domain, we're going to read that by looking at the graph from left to the right. Okay, because we always want to list domain and range from least to greatest. And when we're reading the x-axis, we're reading the smallest numbers on the left first and going to the larger numbers on the right. So in problem 1, we want to look at what x value is the lowest value, or the farthest to the left. And that's going to be where this open circle is at -10. And the graph is going to continue until we get to 25, where we have another circle and we have nothing at the end after that. Okay, so when we want to express this, we're going to say our graph is starting at -10 and it's going all the way until 25. Okay, and if you look up at the top right of your screen, I've drawn these little characters on here. These are to help remember whether to use brackets or parentheses. Okay, so on a graph, when you're reading it, if you see an open circle, that means that your interval at that point should have a parenthesis on it. A closed circle, on the other hand, should have a bracket. Okay, so looking at -10, you can see we have a open circle here, which means we're going to put a parenthesis on that end. And we go all the way back over to 25, and now we have a closed circle. We have a closed circle right here, which means that we're going to finish our domain interval with a bracket. Okay, let's look at the domain for problem 2, and then we'll go back through and we'll do the ranges. Okay, so for the domain, we got the leftmost value being -3, and the rightmost value being a 1. Okay, so we got -3 all the way to 1. Okay, and at both of these endpoints, we have open circles, so that means that we're going to use parentheses on both sides of this. Okay, so our domain is all of the x values that live between -3 and 1, not including those two endpoints. That open circle means that -3 and 1 are not included in the domain, but everything up until that point is. Okay, and then for graph 3, we're starting at -6. And you would think that we're going all the way to 2, but we have graph that lives further. We actually have an endpoint down here, which pushes our graph all the way out to 4 as the other endpoint for the domain. Okay, and at both -6 and 4, we have closed circles. So that means that on both sides of this domain interval, we're going to use brackets. Okay? Now, when we're reading the range, we want to start from the bottom and we want to read up to the top. Okay? And because we're doing least to greatest, the lower numbers, the smaller numbers live below the x-axis. That's why we're starting at the bottom and we're reading bottom to the top. So bottom up. Okay? If it helps, think of like constructing a pyramid. You would start at the bottom and then you would work your way up to the top. Okay, so for problem 1, the lowest y value is where this dot lives at -6. And our graph continues up until we hit this top point at 15. So our range for this problem is going to be -6 to 15. Okay, and then again at -6, I see a closed circle, which means I'm going to put a bracket. And at 15, I see an open circle, so I'm going to use parentheses. Okay, problem 2, my lowest value I see on the graph is going to be where this -3 is. My highest value is going to be where this +3 is. So I'm going to get -3 to +3. And in this case, at both endpoints, I have an open circle, so I'm going to end with a parenthesis. And then for problem 3, my lowest point is going to be where this 14 is, -14. And then I'm going to go all the way up to -4. It's kind of hard to read here, but you are below the x-axis in this graph, so we know that all of these y values below the x-axis are negative numbers. So even though it looks like just a 14, it is in fact -14. So we're going to start our range at -14, and we're going to continue all the way up until we hit that other point at -4. And at both of these endpoints, we have closed circles, so we're going to end our range values. We're going to use brackets on both ends of those. All right, so you have 3 videos on finite graphs for the domain and range. So go ahead and look at the next video to see what it's like when our graphs are continuous or infinite. Best of luck!